Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our CSS Grid mini-series. Now in this video we are going to be talking about grid justify and align, which manifests itself in 4 CSS properties. We have justify content, align content, justify items, and align items. Now these 4 CSS properties are used to format the way our grid items behave themselves. So like, for example, we can actually make our grid items move around the grid itself. So to give a good example of this, we're going to go ahead, or actually to quickly recap, we're going to start up our live server here. And we can see we have this big grid here. This was an example of our autofit in Minimax, which let me open up our style.css. Basically, we are using autofit and Minimax in order to make the grid items always take up the grid, and it tries to fit as many as it can onto one column. Now that was pretty cool, but we are going to go ahead and let me just close these. We are going to kind of change this a bit. So let's first go ahead and set these to 100 pixels, 100 pixels, 100 pixels, and then whoops. And then on top of that, let's go ahead and give our grid, let's remove 3 of these items. Let's go ahead and remove 3 of you, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So yeah, now we have our 9 items, grid 1 through 9. Except what we're going to do is we're going to make the grid a lot bigger. So notice we have this div ID grid right here, and we are messing with it here. What we're first going to do is we're going to give it a border of 1 pixel black solid. I think that's how you do it. Yeah, there we go. So notice just by doing that, I'm actually going to make it a little thicker. This shorthand is to give our grid a border, or to give any item a border, actually. So if I put this on, for example, if I put this on grid nth child 2, which is the one that made them red, and I save, all of these red ones now have borders, but I don't want that. I just want our big one to have a border. And this is a shorthand for border dash width, 2 pixels, border dash color, black, and then border dash style solid. Yes. So doing border 2 pixels black solid is a shorthand for doing this, which is setting the width, color, and style of the border. So perfect. Now we have this, and then we're going to go ahead and change our height to be 500 pixels. Great. So now we have a big square. And the grid, notice, still only takes up this much space. And the reason for that is remember, we have grid template columns, 100 pixels 3 times, and 50 pixels. So that's how much it'll take. It'll take 100 pixels, 100 pixels, 100 pixels, and then 50 pixels per row. So it's not going to actually go past. But what we can do is we can use a couple of properties, justify content and align content, to change the positioning of our grid items. So for example, in our grid selector, so we're selecting this big div here that encompasses all of these, we're going to say justify, my bad, is it justify content? Justify content will be center, and boom. Notice after we do that, the grid items all move to the center. And then same thing with align content. Now if you came from our from my Flexbox series, notice we used justify content and align items. Now this is slightly different, and it probably isn't actually the way it's implemented in CSS, but this is what you use for Flexbox, and you mainly only use these two. When you're using grid, you use these two to actually position the grid items, and then you can use align items and justify items to do some more things, which we'll show in a bit. So like I said, we have all of this. Now justify items and align items does something pretty interesting, which I will show shortly. But justify content, remember, we can use anything that we used for Flexbox. So for example, we can add space around, which will space them like that, or space between, space them like that, or we could do space evenly, which will space them like that, and then we can do the same thing here, space around or between here. So now we have this kind of grid. Or can I do space? No, I can only do around or between here. So cool. So yeah, we can create pretty much any sort of grid layout that we can think of in this manner. And I'm just going to change them both back to center. But yeah, so that's what we have. And then with justify items and align items, it actually positions the grid items inside themselves, which is a little weird to say, but let's go ahead and show you what I mean. So if I say justify items, I think, what are my, or flex start, it will do like that. And then let me make sure I'm doing that right, actually. CSS grid, justify items. Let me make sure it's supposed to be flex start. Okay, so just start and center stretches. So yeah, I don't have to use flex start. I can just say start. So again, notice what happened here. I'm going to remove this again. All of the grid items took up as much space as they were allotted, which is 100 pixels. But when you do a justify item start, it'll make it take up only as much space as it needs, and it'll go to the left. If I want to put it at end, it'll move it to the right. So again, justify items end, but if I comment this, it looks like that, and then if I uncomment, it will move everything to the right-hand side of the grid box. Same thing if I want to do center, it'll move it to the center. Or if I do stretch, which is by default, it will stretch it out. Like, this is how it looks by default. It's on stretch. But again, we can do start, we can do end, we can do center, and in fact, let's just do start here. And look, align items, you can probably already guess, will actually vertically send our items. So if I put this at start, at flex start, it will move them all to the top. If I put it at flex end, it will move them all to the bottom. And if I put it again at center, then it will move them all to the center. So now we have a tiny miniature version of our current grid, and if I delete this, they'll expand out into the full grid squares. So yeah, this was a pretty short one actually. I was just going to go over these 4 properties here for our CSS grid. They are pretty useful, as you can see, because without them, let me just show you again. If I deleted them, we are stuck with this. And again, these justify content and align content are used for positioning. So we can put it at the end, we can put it at the start, we can put it in the center, we can even add space. And then of course the justify items is to position our grid items within themselves, as you can see. I hope that was a good explanation, but yeah. So if you want to see more videos on CSS Grid, or if you happen to miss the previous ones in this series, you can go ahead and check out the playlist, which is linked in the description, where I'm uploading daily. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications whenever I post new videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.